What's up, everybody? It's Dave Nielsen, one of your productivity coaches here. We're going to be going over the single family purchase and sales agreement. This reflects the newest changes from the compensation lawsuit. Um, it is still subject to change, but for now, as I record this, which is September of 2024, this is what we're using. We're going to be going over basically just what goes in the form, and then just a couple of things to think about. We're not going to get too in the weeds on a lot of this stuff here. Anyway, um, also worth mentioning, this is single family, and it is for how do I get this? Okay, single family for Rhode Island. So if this was a multifamily in Rhode Island or a single family in Connecticut or a condo in Massachusetts, these would be different. But for now, this is a single family property in Rhode Island. Okay, so the agreement is made between the seller, so that's the seller's name. It's probably going to be just some names. It could be like, oh, so-and-so in trust of the estate or something like that. But this is the name of the seller and their mailing address. Generally, it's the address of the property. That's good enough. For the buyer, the name of the buyer, obviously, their physical mailing address. And then these lines here are information about the property, what the address is, the plat and lot, which you can pull right from the listing on MLS, city and town, city or town that it's in, and it's in state of Rhode Island, and then the zip code. So that's what all goes in here. Scrolling down, section 3 here for purchase price and deposits, you have to click one of these boxes: is time is of the essence or not. Time is of the essence if you're saying it's yes. Essentially what you're saying is we can't extend this. It must be done by X date. A lot of people enter into contracts being like, we'll just extend it. No big deal. If that box is checked, it's kind of a big deal. Most of the time we're going to check no, but understand that if it's yes, we mean business in terms of those deadlines. We should always be serious about the deadlines, but this is basically the time is of the essence, basically saying you really can't extend. So the purchase price of the property, this is what the total number that the buyer is paying for the property. If we're spending $435,000 on a property, that's what goes here. You spell it out, and then you type out the numbers here. The initial deposit and then the additional deposit. Now, in Rhode Island, we use one-step deposit. You can make it so you would provide a second deposit later, but for the most part, we use a single deposit system in Rhode Island. It's worth mentioning that because in Massachusetts, we actually use a two deposit system. So for Rhode Island, generally what I will do is I will be offering whatever number, I can't say numbers, so let's just say 5 apples. I'm offering 5 apples is my initial deposit, so I will write 5 apples in that line there, and when it is to be delivered, within how many hours of the date of this agreement. I'm going to put 24 because the expectation here is that the buyer is going to deliver the check for 5 apples to the listing brokerage. So I'm going to say within 48 hours. I want to give them a chance to do that. If they are not able to complete that, by the way, this contract is not considered executed. So worth knowing. So if that's what I'm doing, I'm actually not going to put anything in the additional deposits because I don't need to do an additional deposit. And then the balance due at closing is going to be total purchase price minus the deposit. And then the total purchase price is just another rehash of the total purchase price. The escrow agent is generally going to be the listing brokerage. If Keller Williams Realty Leading Edge is the listing brokerage, then you'd put this here. You can actually check that box, and that's how it would be. If it's Remax, Coldwell Banker, whoever, you would put it's the listing brokerage. If it's somebody else, which it can be an attorney, for example, or a title company, if it's like Compass Title and Escrow, you can put Compass Title and Escrow, and you just put other agent, and you would type it here. For the closing date is when the property is going to close. So remember that time is of the essence. If we say that it's November 15th is when this property is going to close, that's when it has to be closed by, and that's the date that it's going to go here. It's not here, up here. Closing is to be held on the date and the year. It says 10 a.m. I'm telling you, it's probably not going to be 10 a.m., but it does say 10 a.m. And it also says that the Office of Land Evidence Records, it's generally not going to be that. But for this, all we care about is the date. Is the date. For the mortgage contingency is one of the major protections in this contract for the buyer. We're not going to go too deep into what it is. I'm just kind of telling you what goes here. But the excuse me. for the mortgage commitment letter. So during this process, the mortgage lender is going to submit a letter that says, we're lending on this property. It's not a clear to close, but it's saying like maybe we've done all of our verifications. We just have a couple last steps to go. You'll get that letter. This section is laying when that part has to be done. Generally speaking, it's not a rule. This is general. It's about a week before closing if you have a 30-day close. So I said November 15th. So you would say November 8th would be the mortgage contingency deadline in this case. An amount not to exceed. This is worth spending a moment on. This is going to be a dollar amount. So let's just say, what was the number I used earlier? Well, let's do an easier number, $500,000. $500,000 is the purchase price in our example. And the buyer is putting down 20%. What this is saying, the amount not to exceed, this is the amount of money they are financing. Okay. So in the example I just gave, financing, they're putting down 20% on 500. That means they're putting down, what's 20% of 500? They're putting down 100 grand. So they're financing $400,000. It's hard to do math and talk to the camera at the same time. I'm going to shudder to think that I got that math later. Be gracious to me if I did. But I think I'm right. So anyway, they're financing $400,000. The amount not to exceed. So this is a percentage. This is the interest rate. You don't need to put the actual interest rate. In fact, by the time you're filling out this contract, you probably don't even know what the rate's going to be. So the word that we usually put here, you can put prevailing. Again, prevailing. You could also put market rate. That's fine here. Just note that it doesn't have to be an actual number here. For a term of at least, most mortgages are 30 years. It could be more than that, but most of the time they're 30 years. And then with a maximum of however many points. There might be a situation where you want to put how many points go there, but for the most part, you put NA, not applicable for points. Points, by the way, is 1% of the loan amount. So if I'm borrowing $400,000, one point is $4,000. And the buyer should apply for this mortgage within a certain number of days, 5 to 7 days, 5 days, 7 days, whatever, but not a lot of days should go there. All right, let's scroll on. For your personal property and fixtures, this is stuff that is going to be left in the house or stuff that must be taken from the house. So fridge, stove, people just assume that those things are going to stay. We don't really like to assume in real estate, so please put those things in here. Your coach, me, will give you language to put in this box, but generally it's going to be fridge, stove, whatever appliances. We will list them out by name. We'll say, fridge, stove, dishwasher, blah, 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 to remain in as is, as seen condition at no implied monetary value for convenience of all parties. The reason we say that is we don't want the bank thinking that they're financing the purchase of these like crazy appliances. So it's lending language. Take it from me. If we absolutely don't want that fridge, because I have some crazy fridge that is worth a bajillion dollars and I'm going to use that fridge and I don't want the seller's fridge, I would put in here, sellers must take out the fridge. Seller shall convey property by, they're asking what type of deed. 99 times out of 100 in Rhode Island, guys, it's going to be a warranty deed. If you think it is going to be anything else, let's talk to your coach and we'll get another line in there. Section 10 here. There could be an assessment on the property. It's some kind of, I don't want to say penalty. It's not really a penalty, but it's some kind of cost or lien that is attached to the property that must be paid at the time of closing. These two lines determine who pays it. Does the seller pay it or does the buyer pay it? There's no rule that says one party must do it, even though some people think there is. There's really no rule. It could be one or the other. I like to put the seller because if I'm the one writing this contract, I probably am representing the buyer, so I put the seller. But each deal could be different, I have to say. Skipping over some of these sections here. I generally don't put anything in here. This section here for 13. So these are documents that the buyer must see and initial, if applicable. I say if applicable because the sales disclosure and the lead disclosure, while required in Rhode Island, aren't always with the listing. So I say they're required, but if it's like an estate sale, they're not. So in this example, your buyer might not actually have those. So you would not want them to initial these spaces, but generally they're going to be here and they're going to be attached to a listing. And mandatory relationship disclosure. You will have filled this out with your buyer that says you're representing them however it is that you're representing them, usually as a designated client representative. Oh, I'm ignoring this phone call, pardon me. And they'll have to acknowledge that they've received that. This thing, the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home, literally Google Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. You can download it and you can send it to them and then they can check this box that says they got it. The inspections contingency in Rhode Island, you have 10 business days, and say here, exclusive of Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. You have 10 business days to complete your inspections. And when I say complete your inspections, that means the inspectors come out to the property, they've provided their report to the buyer, you've gone over it with your buyer, and you have requested any upgrades or credits or fixes or whatever that you're going to request, and that they've been agreed upon by the seller. All of that stuff has to be done in this 10-day period. If it's not, then the seller is under no obligation to do anything, and the buyer is actually stuck in the deal. They can't back out because this contingency will have expired. This, aside from the closing date, is the most important date in the contract, in my opinion, because if a deal is going to fall apart, it's most likely going to fall apart during the inspection. So this is your window where if you're going to get out, you got to get out. So just understand that this is a really important time in your transaction. If you're going to be adding additional provisions to that part of the contract, the inspection part, when you say something like inspection conducted for informational purposes only, that would go here. I personally don't think that's useful language, but that's a conversation for another time, not this video. If the buyer is waiving this right, so to say we're not going to conduct the inspection, we're just going to go right past it, you would initial any of this that they're waiving. Do not have them initial this if they are planning to conduct their inspection. If the deal is contingent on them, you do not want them waiving these contingencies. Very, very important. So further information down here in section 17, kind of the who's who in the deal, the name of the seller, their address. This is actually all stuff towards the top of the listing as well. I'm sorry, towards the top of the contract. The listing brokerage, all that information would go here. License numbers. Listen, you're not going to know the license numbers of the other broker, of the other agent and their broker. If you watch my anatomy of a listing video, you'll see how to find that information. You can find it right in the lease. Listen to me, in the listing, excuse me. And then how they represent their client, which is almost certainly as the designated seller representative. For the buyer, hey, listen, same thing. Name, their mailing address, cooperating brokerage. If you're representing the buyer, that's cooperating brokerage. So in the example where we are Keller Williams Realty Leading Edge, that's what would go here. Again, assuming we're representing the buyer. It's possible we're representing both. If Melanie Ruiz has the listing, her information will be up here. Her seller, her listing brokerage, her name, her license ID. But then I, also Keller Williams Realty Leading Edge, am representing the buyer. My information would go here. So you could actually have KW Leading Edge on both sides of this, right? Just with different agents. This section here, this is the newest section. Now, it is imperative that I say that these are conversations that we should have with your coach before you go around submitting these, because these conversations are complicated, not just because they're new, but also because not every agent out in the industry understands this thing yet. We believe that we have a pretty good handle on it here. So we are going to have a conversation with you guys about what to put in this section. It is important to know that all compensations, everything is negotiable here. You can't just say it's set and we can't talk about it. This is all entirely negotiable. But let's just say that we have to go through a couple of examples actually. So let's just go through the form. So these sections, A, B, C, D in section 18. This agreement is subject to the seller paying the cooperating brokerage, the following professional services fee upon blah, 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 blah. notice it says the seller. So if the seller is the one who pays, it's not the listing brokerage anymore like it used to be. It's the seller who is doing the paying. So if your deal is contingent on the seller paying your compensation, your professional services fee, that would have to go in here. Is it going to be a flat fee? Are they going to be paying you $10,000 to do this? $20,000, $15? Like, what are they paying you? That goes here. Are they going to be paying you a percentage of the gross sale price? That would go here if that was the case. Or if it's any other condition, like if it was on the net sale price, which is what's most common in Rhode Island, you would say, 5 apples of the net purchase price. You would just type it out in there, right? If the buyer is paying, which is really possible now. So if the buyer is paying, you would say that the buyer either will or will not compensate their broker according to a separate buyer contract, which you will have a buyer representation agreement with your buyers. So it could be that the seller is paying you something. It could be that the buyer is also paying you something. And if they are paying you, they are compensating you through another contract. It is also important to note here, according to Section C, how many parties you're getting paid. You're getting paid by. Are you receiving compensation from multiple parties in this deal? If you are, yes. If you are not, no. Okay. And then just some legalese here. The cooperating brokerage is intended to be a third-party beneficiary of this agreement. Please again understand that this is this section. You should be talking to your coach about all of these sections, but in particular, this one, because this one's new and not everybody has a full understanding of it yet. So please feel free to come to your coach with questions about this. Okay, scrolling down, almost done, getting close to the end of the contract here. Additional provisions. There is some language that I always write in here. If the deal is financed, I do want it subject to the property appraising. So the language I would put in here, and you can see I can just type it in if I wanted to, subject to property appraising at or above agreed upon purchase price. Again, I'll say it if you're writing it down. Subject to property appraising at or above agreed upon purchase price. That's language that can go in there. Other things that could go in here, depending on the deal, if the buyer is getting a credit for closing costs, that would say, seller to contribute however many $1,000 towards buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and escrows. That's language that you can put in there. If there are, I should go a section above. If there are other addenda in the property, in the contract, like subject to suitable housing, that would have to get listed here too. Sorry, I skipped that. Anyway, additional provisions. Anything else that the deal is contingent on that is not otherwise stated in the contract above must go here. Please understand that your coach needs to review your documentation before your client sees it. If you are in the launch level of our program, so in your first 5 deals, you need to submit this stuff to us. We're going to make sure that everything that has to be in there is in there according to the parameters of your deal with your client. And then lastly, again, if you are preparing this, it will be you, and you're probably preparing as a cooperating licensee on the buyer side. Not definitely, but probably. So you would put that there, and then you would put your name and then the address of the brokerage, not your home address, please. And then everybody can sign here. Bada bing, bada boom. Contract will be done. Last thought on this stuff, when they talk about on the date of the agreement, if I were to, where can I find one? This is a good example here, right here. Oops. Initial deposit shall be paid, delivered, blah, 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 within blank hours of the date of this agreement. Just note that the date of this agreement is the first full business day after the contract has been signed by all parties. So if you write the offer on Monday and the buyer signs on Monday, and then the seller signs on Tuesday, day 1 of the agreement is actually Wednesday, first full day. Okay. If the contract is fully executed by all parties on Friday, and then Monday's a holiday, the first day is not actually till Tuesday. So it's important. Worth noting, that's Rhode Island. That's different in other states. So again, this contract was just for Rhode Island. Last thought for you guys here. If you have any further questions about it, please contact your coach. This is a complicated document. It is the big daddy of real estate documents. So please make sure that you understand this thoroughly before you explain it to your clients. And the best way to do that is to bring a document that you have filled out on behalf of a client, or even just as a practice, to your coach for review. Thanks.